In the headlines this evening, Korea and New Zealand officially sign a free trade deal. What impact will this have on the two nations? Korea's financial industry is not performing as well as other sectors. We delve deeper into what's holding it back and possible solutions. And Kuan Yew, the founding father of Singapore, passed away at the age of 91. These stories and more coming right up. Stay with us. It's Monday, March 23rd here in Seoul. You're watching Early Edition at 6. I'm Laah Hyun-kyung.
And I'm Daniel Choy. Thank you for joining us. Let's start at the nation's top office. President Park Geun-hye held talks with New Zealand Prime Minister John Key earlier today.
That's right. The two leaders officially signed a bilateral free trade agreement, and this is all the more meaningful as it comes after 5.5 years of negotiations. Our Chae-Yu-sun starts us off.
President Park Geun-hye said Monday's signing of the Korea-New Zealand FTA will go down in history as a major event in 53 years of diplomatic relations between the two countries.
FTA 정식 서명으로 이제 양국 관계는 경제 분야는 물론이고 문화 또 인적 교류 그 안보 또 국제 협력 이런 다방면에서 한 차원 더욱 높은 그런 협력을 해나갈 수 있는 중요한 토대를 마련했다고 생각합니다.
On his fourth visit to Korea, Prime Minister John Key thanked President Park for her leadership in resuming trade negotiations after a 3-year deadlock.
I'm sure that the benefits to Koreans and New Zealanders will be significant over the years ahead, and so this is a very special and beautiful day to be in Seoul.
Both countries have agreed to remove tariffs on most of their traded goods in 15 years. However, nearly 200 products categorized as sensitive items for Korea, such as rice, are exempt from the pact. Aside from trade, New Zealand will expand its working holiday quota to 3,000 Koreans a year and share training on its advanced agriculture and fisheries technology. At Monday's talks, the two leaders also discussed ways to integrate initiatives involving creativity and innovation as a new growth engine, agreeing to increase cooperation in science, ICT, and film. President Park said the latest trade deal will give Korea's agriculture sector an opportunity to become more globally competitive by learning from the New Zealand experience. She also anticipated more job opportunities for Koreans both at home and abroad. Chae-Yu-sun, Arirang News.
Well, compared to Korea's other mega FTA partners such as the U.S. and the EU, New Zealand is quite a smaller market.
That's right. Our Shin Se-min takes a look at the economic benefits the deal could bring to Korea, as well as some of the concerns.
The latest free trade agreement between Korea and New Zealand is set to increase trade beyond the approximately $3.2 billion generated last year. Most of the exchange products will have little to no tariffs, with Korea eliminating duties on 96% of all shipped goods from New Zealand in the next 15 years, and New Zealand removing all taxes on Korean goods in 7 years. Korean exporters shipping small electronic goods, auto parts, and heavy equipment will see a boost as these goods will enter the market with low tariffs. And New Zealand's popular imports? Wine, beef, and dairy products. The pact will just swap more than just products. It'll also open doors to Korean youth employment in New Zealand and easier exchange of agricultural technologies and expertise. New Zealand's Zespri has already helped Jeju Island kiwi farmers.
This year, Jeju Island kiwi made it into the Singaporean market for the first time, contributing to the regional economy. And Korean companies are also making headway into New Zealand with an ICT company that manufactures a smart card for transportation.
But Koreans in the dairy and livestock industry aren't happy, as New Zealand's strong dairy industry will increase competition in the domestic market. Korea's Rural Economic Institute projected over 2 trillion won, or $1.8 billion worth of domestic losses. But some experts advise patience.
This is part of improving our competitiveness in the long run by giving a wider selection to consumers. Lowering trade barriers is only one part of the FTA's benefits.
Although New Zealand isn't a large exporting partner, experts say with the right amount of government regulation and thorough monitoring, the agreement will generate mutual economic benefits. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
In other news, China is winning more support for the launch of the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. The IMF and the World Bank have pledged to cooperate with key allies of the U.S., including Korea, considering their participation. Song Ji-sun has the details.
With some 30 countries on the roster as founding members, Beijing is garnering international support for its Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, set to begin operations by the end of the year. World Bank President Kim Yong-kim said the two organizations are discussing how they can work together, while the leaders of the IMF and the Asian Development Bank said they would be happy to cooperate with the new regional lender. Beijing has previously indicated that the AIIB would seek to complement, not compete with, the existing international institutions. However, Washington has cautioned other countries against joining, citing concerns about transparency and Beijing's increased influence in the region. It recently proposed co-financing project with existing development banks, saying it welcomes new multilateral institutions that strengthen the international financial architecture. Meanwhile, Washington's key strategic allies in the region are considering joining the AIIB. Japan and Australia have shown interest but have yet to decide, and Korea is expected to announce its decision this week before the AIIB's deadline of March 31st. Seoul is reportedly seeking a share that's high enough to allow it to participate in decision-making. China has offered to fund up to 50% of the $50 billion fund. Song Ji-sun, Arirang News.
The foreign ministers of Korea, China, and Japan met over the weekend. Hopes were high. The gathering would pave the way for a summit between the three countries' leaders, but the prospects of that happening appear to be dim right now. Arirang's Foreign Affairs Ministry correspondent Hwang Sung-hee reports.
Hope that Saturday's trilateral talks could lead to a summit quickly fizzled out when the Chinese foreign minister made some strong remarks against Japan for its distorted perception of history.
Facing history squarely and advancing towards the future is the right attitude to handle historical issues. It's also the only way to push bilateral ties forward and boost trilateral cooperation.
Tangled in numerous historical and territorial disputes, the trilateral talks were the first of their kind in nearly 3 years. Following the meeting, the three top diplomats agreed to work towards holding a summit at the earliest convenient time. But Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi told reporters after the talks that no set timetable was agreed upon and that a proper environment must be created first. Experts say Beijing wants to ensure Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe includes words of remorse in his statement to mark the 70th anniversary of Japan's surrender in World War II.
China intends to wait until August for Japan's position on the issue before reaching a decision on the Korea-China-Japan summit. In that case, a summit won't happen until at least fall.
And with Japanese Foreign Ministry Press Secretary Yasuhisa Kawamura telling Seoul-based Yonhap News Agency that the Abe statement and the trilateral summit are two separate issues, the chance of the three leaders meeting anytime soon appears little more than wishful thinking. Hwang Sung-hee, Arirang News.
And with bilateral ties between Korea and Japan at one of their lowest points in recent history, a group of Korean political and economic leaders are trying to mend the frosty ties. They met with the Japanese leader in Tokyo today, calling for efforts for improved relations. Our Connie Kim has this story.
A group of veteran political and economic leaders from South Korea have called on Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe to restore strained bilateral ties. In a meeting with Abe, the South Korean representatives said the two nations need to create conditions for a summit between Seoul and Tokyo. The former leaders also called for improved relations marking the 50th anniversary of diplomatic ties. In response, Abe has reportedly said he will make efforts for improved bilateral relations. Japanese media NHK, however, reports that Abe called for summit talks with no strings attached. Abe is said to make a World War II anniversary statement in August, but there have been concerns that he will shift away from the 1995 landmark apology issued by then Prime Minister Domichi Murayama. Abe had said he wants to reflect his government's position in a statement. South Korean and Japanese representatives, including the former prime ministers from the two sides, first met on Sunday. The participants in Sunday's meeting agreed on the need for a comprehensive solution to address the most pressing issues between the two nations. Diplomatic relations between Seoul and Tokyo have been at a historic low, mainly due to Abe's repeated denial of Japan's historic wrongdoings. In May, the group will meet again in Seoul to compile a proposal, which they plan to send to President Park Geun-hye and Prime Minister Abe. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
The South Korean activist group, which had planned an anti-North Korea leaflet launch this Thursday, has called off its plan. Park Sang-hak, the group's leader, told Seoul-based Yonhap News Agency on Monday that he will not fly the controversial leaflets at this time. He explained that North Korea's warnings of counterattacks show how much they fear the leaflet campaign. Park said he will end the launches for good if the regime takes responsibility for the sinking of a South Korean warship, the Cheonan, back in 2010. Earlier this month, Park revealed plans to fly 500,000 anti-Pyongyang leaflets and DVD copies of the U.S. movie The Interview in time for the 5th anniversary of the sinking of the warship Cheonan.
A fire broke out on North Korea's side of the heavily guarded demilitarized zone earlier this afternoon. The fire spread quickly through the barbed wire fence separating the two Koreas, moving to the South Korean side at around 1 p.m. Korea time. The South Korean military said 7 fire trucks and some 50 firefighters have been dispatched to the site. The Inter-Korean Transit Office, which is the commuting route for South Korean workers at the Kaesong Industrial Complex, has been temporarily closed since 2 p.m. In this week's Industry Insight, we take a look at Korea's financial sector, which is unfortunately lagging far behind many of the country's other sectors.
Financial firms in the nation are advised to stop pursuing easy profits and start thinking outside the box. Here's Arirang's Hwang Ji-hye for this report.
Korea's financial industry remains relatively underdeveloped compared to the overall competitiveness of its economy. It's been more than a decade since Korea first expressed desire to develop its financial sector, but surprisingly, it's still at about the same level as Uganda and even lower than Colombia and Ghana. So what's been pulling back progress? When Korea's new chief financial regulator took office last week, he sharply criticized the industry, saying it's only interested in generating easy profits by raking in the interest it earns from lending to investors. He said the banking sector is ignoring its duty to invent new markets and products. Korea's record low key interest rate also indicates that relying on time-honored sources of income is no longer going to cut it. Korea is considered a financial no-go zone for many foreign banks, with big names like HSBC closing its retail business unit here and Goldman Sachs closing its asset management unit a couple of years ago. A former central bank executive was also in charge of the Financial Stability Department says the withdrawals are clear examples of why the Korean banking sector is struggling.
They leave because of the regulation, ring-fencing behavior. Korea-specific regulation, which does not exist at their home country.
While pundits call for measures to tackle such issues, they add that more attention should be focused on developing the country's capital market. That by, for example, allowing more authority for brokerage firms in terms of fees, interest rates, and dividends.
Korea's financial industry has been riding on the back of the banking sector for so long. To ensure we take the next step forward, the government should create an environment where the capital market and the banking sector can coexist.
Analysts also say that the chopping and changing of economic policies under different administrations is why Korea's financial sector has lost its way over the past 10 years. So it's crucial the entire system starts pursuing new and creative plans to take it to the next level. Hwang Ji-hye, Arirang News.
Business partners face a one-day entry ban. 77.
Digging deeper, getting to the bottom of stories that impact your life. Talking with you on air and online. Connecting you with experts on the world's most pressing issues. News and current affairs at its best. With Laah Hyun-kyung and Daniel Choy.
Arirang News.
Arirang News.
Arirang News.
On Early Edition at 6.
Korean lawmakers are once again calling for more stringent safety measures following a fire on Sunday at a campsite in the western city of Incheon that killed 5 people. Representatives from both the ruling and main opposition parties stressed that recently introduced facility safety checks and safety education guidelines have to be strictly followed and enforced. They say despite efforts to boost safety following last year's Seoul ferry accident, the tent fire tragedy shows Korea still has a long way to go. In light of the fire in Incheon, the Seoul metropolitan government is conducting safety inspections at 10 camping sites in the capital today.
To help Korea's small and mid-sized companies sell their products to foreign customers online, the government is developing strategies for targeting specific overseas markets. Online transactions will be simplified too after credit card companies scrap ActiveX, a mandatory authentication program, by the end of March. Our Kim Min-ji has more.
Online shoppers in the U.S., China, Japan, Vietnam, and Indonesia are the targets in a new government strategy to increase foreign spending on Korean shopping websites. The countries were selected based on their number of online transactions as well as their market size. Under the plan, products, marketing campaigns, payment, and delivery methods will be shaped to meet the preferences of each international market. This comes as the online transactions market has been growing, but small and medium-sized companies have not been able to take full advantage of the growth as they lack the ability to customize sales for specific overseas groups. And in a long-awaited move that will make online shopping a lot easier overall, major local card companies will discontinue the ActiveX plugin starting this week. Until now, it's been a must-have for shoppers making a purchase of over 300,000 won, or roughly $270. ActiveX was initially implemented to enhance internet security, but was often criticized for being slow and having poor web compatibility, limiting access to online shopping. The change will make buying online much simpler and let online shoppers use internet browsers other than the current Internet Explorer, such as Chrome or Safari. Card companies will replace the ActiveX software with an exe file, which users will only have to download once regardless of the browser they use, or launch alternative payment programs. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Moving on to other stories, the amount of excess cash held by Korean households hit a record high last year. The Bank of Korea says the figure stood at roughly $82 billion. That's up around $3.8 billion from 2013. Excess cash refers to the money that's left over after household spending. Although income is on an upward trend, this record figure is attributed to people spending less of their disposable income in an unstable economic climate. Experts say they may also be holding on to cash to prepare for their lives after retirement or to repay growing household debts.
Korea's Ebola support team has returned from its one-month mission in Sierra Leone. It's been a significant and successful experience for the volunteers, but with the virus still present, medical experts have issued a one-year anniversary report that slams the international community for its slow response. Kwon Yew has this report.
It's been roughly a year since the deadliest Ebola epidemic in history broke out in West Africa. Countries around the world, including Korea, have contributed to the effort to contain the virus. Korea sent medical teams to Sierra Leone, one of the 3 countries most affected by the virus. It was the first time the country dispatched medical teams to an epidemic of this size. A total of 3 teams of volunteer doctors and nurses embarked on roughly 1-month missions after prior training sessions in England. All members returned home safe, though there was a close call when a rescue worker was pricked by a needle carrying a patient's blood. Tests revealed the worker did not contract the virus. Although the decreasing number of new Ebola patients has also reduced the need for international staff, the fight is not over yet. In Liberia, the first case in around 3 weeks has officials concerned. 42 days without an Ebola case would have declared the country virus-free. A leading charity group, Paris-based Doctors Without Borders, released a 1-year anniversary report on Monday, saying the epidemic could have been contained much earlier. The report criticized the international community, including the World Health Organization, for its slow response. The crisis was declared 3 months after the first reports of Ebola outbreaks. The charity also blamed local governments for downplaying the situation and not sharing significant data with their organization, suggesting a better controlled crisis could have shrunk the death toll, which currently stands at over 10,000. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
Well, it's a sad day for Singapore as the country's first prime minister passed away after being hospitalized for pneumonia about 2 months ago.
Right. Lee Kuan Yew had his critics and his fans, but whatever they said, he did whatever it took to turn a little dot on the map into a gleaming global metropolis, and he did that very well. And he will be remembered by many people around the world. And here's our Kim Ji-yeon with the details.
Singapore's founding father and his first Prime Minister Lee Kuan Yew passed away on Monday at the age of 91. His eldest son and incumbent Prime Minister Lee Hsien-loong declared a week-long period of national mourning after announcing the death, saying his father passed away peacefully at the Singapore General Hospital. Lee Kuan Yew was admitted to hospital early last month for pneumonia and had been on life support ever since. For days, thousands of people have been leaving flowers and cards praying for his recovery, but now those messages are filled with words wishing their revered leader farewell. Lee, a Cambridge-educated lawyer, was one of the most influential figures in post-colonial Asia. He's credited with transforming Singapore from a British outpost to a global trading and financial hub in just a single generation. Singapore became one of the world's wealthiest nations during Lee's rule. Its GDP per capita stood at around $13,000 in 1990, soaring up from just $400 in 1959. Even after stepping down as prime minister, Lee was a towering figure behind Singapore's rise into an Asian economic tiger. Last year, the country's GDP recorded over $55,000, Asia's highest and the world's 8th highest. While he is praised for raising Singapore from rags to riches, Lee was criticized by some for his harsh handling of dissenting views to his authoritarian rule. Alongside his market-friendly policies, Lee held strict controls over the press, public protests, and his political opponents. Despite the criticism, a chorus of tributes followed from world leaders, including U.S. President Barack Obama, who hailed Lee as a true giant of history who we remember for generations. UN Secretary General Pan Ki-moon said Lee was a legendary figure in Asia, respected for his strong leadership. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
Well, due to strong winds, we've had a sudden spring cold snap.
Well, just when you thought it was spring, right? Let's turn to our Michelle Park to find out when we'll get the warm weather back. Michelle.
Good evening, guys. It's been a cold day with an almost 10 degrees temperature drop from yesterday. Our daytime high of 11 wasn't too bad, but like you said, Daniel, the wind made it feel much colder, closer to 5 degrees. Now we're expecting an even colder morning tomorrow with freezing temperatures. However, the cold spell is expected to let up tomorrow afternoon. Now there will also be huge gaps in temperatures from the mornings to nights. Perfect conditions for catching a cold, so make sure to bundle up. Now, however, the air quality is looking good with fine dust level at normal, but dry weather continues to linger with warnings and advisories in effect for most regions. Now, looking at this week's weather, dry, sunny conditions are expected in most parts of the country until Sunday, when spring showers are expected to fall here in Seoul and Gangwon province, and temperature-wise, it will slowly rise back up, bringing warm weather conditions into our weather. Now, with that in mind, let's have a look at the readings for tomorrow. Seoul will start off the Tuesday morning at 2 and gets up to 13 in the afternoon, while Daegu and Busan will top to 14 and 13 degrees respectively. Moving over to other regions, Jeju gets up to 11, Dokdo hits to 7, while Mount Keungang drops low to -1 degrees. That's all for now. I'm Shaw Park, and I hope you have a wonderful evening.
Thanks for that, Michelle. That's the end of our newscast. Have a good start to your day or a safe drive home. This has been Daniel Choy.
And I'm Laah Hyun-kyung. See you again at the same time tomorrow. Goodbye for now.